May I take the first, should we say, 3 questions? What I hope to do is also get some questions online, because I believe there are a number of people following us. So
and we have a rich audience with a lot.
We have indeed a very rich, very wealthy audience. So we'll seek donations for ODI as well. No, if you let me ask for 3 questions now, and then if are you going to bring the online questions? Oh, somebody will. Okay. Well, let's ask now for the 3 people. I'll take 1, 2, and anyone else? 1, 2, and 3, and then yes, at the back, please. Your name, please.
Okay, my name is Nigel Nichols, and I studied development and international relations, and I have a few connections through people that I know who work with small NGOs, that kind of thing, in South Sudan. Okay, so my main question is to William Bain, you know, the Right Honourable, I believe, maybe. Okay, but it's regarding the foreign investment. Hello? Yeah, it's regarding the foreign investment, and how will you be working with, whether it's the government of South Sudan or local NGOs on the ground, to ensure that that foreign investment is participated in a way that's transparent and you know, has contingencies in it that ensure that benefits are built in for, you know, local populations, and also with the capacity, you know, the ability of the government to manage that process, and also to build capacity with other organizations and other individuals in those communities.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, in the front here. And we are rejoined by Juba, as you see.
Thank you very much. I'm Caroline Cox, member of the Associate Parliamentary Group on Sudan and South Sudan, and also CEO of HEART, Humanitarian Aid Relief Trust, with programs in South Sudan and also Southern Kordofan. I'd just like for me to come back briefly to the humanitarian crisis, because it's hard to build civil society or democracy on an empty stomach or when children and babies are dying around you. And just to highlight very briefly some of the key issues, that 100,000 we heard have returned from north to south, about 750,000 around Juba, but also, I think as you mentioned, the refugees and those who fled from southern Kordofan into South Sudan, I reckon it's over 300,000, tens of thousands from Blue Nile into southern Sudan, and of course, those who still are in Bahr Ghazal and other places from Abyei. I'm glad to hear from Luca that some have now gone back. But just that on top of the humanitarian crisis was already pre-existing from the war. Only 15% of the population has immunization, 85% vulnerable to the things they should not be vulnerable to, like polio, TB, diphtheria, whooping cough. 1 in 7 mothers die in pregnancy and childbirth. And we could go on with that catalogue. I won't, because our friends in South Sudan know this only too well. But my 2 questions. First of all, what more would you like the international community to do to help with this humanitarian crisis, which is escalating all the time with the continuing conflicts in Blue Nile and in southern Kordofan? We are told that lots of money is pouring in from the West, but do you feel it's being used effectively? Do you feel it's reaching the people who are dying throughout South Sudan today? So would you like the international community to be more effective in its use of humanitarian resources that are being made available? And particularly, do you feel it is really time to move from aid to development when there's still so many people with a humanitarian crisis? And finally, the effects... Sorry.
Just one question.
Yes.
Thank you.
I just want the effects of the austerity measures on humanitarian crisis. Thank you very much.
This gentleman.
Thank you. Hashim Ahmed, I'm the former General Manager of Sudan Railways and a member of APG. I'm concerned about the recurring problems and the present problems in Jonglei and Sivla, and all the obstructions and problems mentioned by His Excellency Ambassador, the expected problems due to the situation, starting from the livelihood of the people, roads, security, education, and everything. Is there any possibility of course, the key point in this is the implementation of the CPA, because it's been uncompleted. What are the possibilities of revisiting the CPA, having an extension to the CPA on new basis, and issuing an agreement? Because this will open the way in front of both governments, and will be a sort of prospective solution to all the problems envisaged. I would like to hear from the people in Juba. What is the problem of reaching a solution with the government? Thank you.
Wouldn't we all? Unfortunately, we seem to have lost them again. William, would you like to come back on first on the point that Mr. Nichols put about foreign investments and transparency?
Yeah, it's a really good one, because I mean, I think that, you know, the country's got to move into sort of development phase. I mean, we heard when the sort of trade investment people came to Westminster a few weeks ago, the urgent need for infrastructure, roads. We heard from one of our speakers from Juba, the transport network. But I think also it's about trying to provide people with the tools to, in a sense, make their own living. I mean, in terms of things like agriculture, you know, things like microfinance for, you know, letting people be able to have their own bit of land and cultivate their own crops. That's going to be incredibly important in empowering people and giving them the facilities to make their own living in the coming years. I think also, clearly, although there is no UKTI involvement in South Sudan as yet, I believe that the Department for Business, Innovation and Skills and also through DFID has got plans to establish one. So we will continue to press the government here and also those throughout the EU and in the African Union about what they can do to develop the South Sudanese economy. But, you know, clearly, given the sort of crisis that's happened with the oil revenues, if we're going to see sort of levels of food poverty and child poverty increase in South Sudan as a result, there will be an emergency situation in the coming months that will have to be alleviated. But there has to be a longer term strategy about how you diversify an economy away from oil. You know, that is critical. I don't think it's healthy for any state anywhere in the world to be as dependent on oil revenue as is the case at the moment. Some of the points that Caroline mentioned in terms of the humanitarian crisis, Save the Children, as you know, recently were in South Sudan and made a very powerful report about what's got to be done. I think focusing on what's happening specifically to children, I think that is exceptionally powerful, and both the African Union and the South Sudanese government have really got to sort of take the findings of that report and implement them. And of course, one of the great forgotten humanitarian problems in Africa at the moment is what's happening in Jonglei, and we've tried to get it discussed in Parliament a fair bit. We will continue to press the government here, the EU and the African Union, to see what they can do to try and solve this. I mean, I think what we can see from what's happened elsewhere in Africa is its engagement with international institutions that can often be the answer to this. And I hope that you know, the great promise that South Sudan has, but also the great challenges it's facing at the moment, that if we can facilitate that greater engagement, that in the end that will be the solution to many of its problems.
Thank you very much. I'll ask you to come back in a moment on Haji Ahmed's point about extending the CPA and whether that would be possible. Not an easy one, but may I say just a couple of things about the refugees which you raised, because I have just come back from the border area and I saw the conditions in the camps. In both people coming across from Blue Nile and in South Kordofan. In Blue Nile, the camps are very well established now. There's something like 80,000 people in the major camps, some of them very close to the border. There are another roughly 20,000 that are on the border or close to the border, who the UNHCR are trying to get to come back into the camps because the area is still highly unstable and there have been attacks by Sudanese aircraft still in the area, and people are still fleeing from that. They continue to come across the border at the rate of between 100 and 200 a day. So it is still a very fragile situation. There's one excellent piece of news, which is that the operation through Djibouti, Ethiopia, and then into South Sudan has begun. Trucks are coming across and making that trip in between 6 and 7 days, and they are beginning to build up the stockpiles, which will be absolutely vital if the situation is to be maintained in those camps during the rainy season. The other thing that is happening is that there is an intensive program of surveying the camps, because they are, half of them will be underwater during the rainy season, and the UNHCR is using an amazingly complicated system of positioning to work out which areas will be above the waterline and trying to move people out of them, while as still keeping people within their family groups, within their tribal groups, so that there isn't conflict. And it's a very fragile situation, but they seem to be handling it very well. In relation to Blue Nile, South Kordofan, there are far fewer people coming across. Most of the people seem to be still remaining north of the border. The camps seem to have something like 17,000, 18,000 people in them, and there are plenty of military in those camps. Now, how many of them are South Sudanese and how many of them are coming from the north, I leave to your imagination. But there certainly are heavily militarized in those camps, and people are continuing to flow backwards and forwards across that border. Would you like to say something then about the CPA?
Yeah, before I talk about the CPA, I wanted to reflect on, again, the humanitarian development side. And it's interesting, you see the international, agreements, international mechanisms, a potential response. But for me, it's also actually a much deeper engagement with the national side, because what I was doing in Juba 2 weeks ago was actually facilitating some engagement between national NGOs, the National NGO Forum, different members of that forum, and a number of international NGOs. And it was very clear, discussing on some of the programs of assistance that we have in South Sudan, both on the humanitarian and the development side, how little, the level of understanding of knowledge, of capacity to operate of the national organizations and individuals is brought in when designing this assistance. And in many ways, it's really trying to capture more, their analysis, when developing the strategies that I think is missing very much. Because what's happening at the moment is that we use national NGOs, and individuals very much in a subcontracting way, implementing programs that United Nations agencies or international NGOs design, very much driven by calls by donors to respond to this tender or the other tender, or this the CHF, the Common Humanitarian Fund, or whatever tender is put out there. But it's really the other way around, rather than coming from an analysis of what's happening on the ground and it's really needed, area by area. We're just responding to a massive general call and then looking around for who can implement a bit of this and that, locally. And inevitably that leads to rather, kind of inefficient and inadequate, assistance on the ground. So it's how we can stimulate, this national capacity that does exist to feed a lot more into how we develop the assistance programs and the strategies for assistance in South Sudan. I think that, for me, is the big discussion when we think about these strategies. In terms of extending the CPA, there is a mechanism that is in place to look at the outstanding issues of the Comprehensive Peace Agreement. It's obviously the former Special Representative of the Secretary General, Haile Menkario, still has a mandate to oversee the dialogue between the Sudan and South Sudan over the outstanding issues that were not implemented. We have the ambassador of Sudan in the room. We have Alex Tevalu is working with the AU high-level implementation panel. They may want to comment on where the efforts are at the moment, but there is a lot of active mediation going on behind doors, both within the track that Haile Menkario is leading, and with the AU high-level implementation panel that Thabo Mbeki is leading with Alex's assistance. I don't know if you want to come in. The chair distracted. Probably they would be better placed to comment on where we are at with dealing with all the outstanding issues.
Indeed, I will bring both of them in because they clearly have a great deal to say. But can I just take another round of questions. We've got some online questions. I tell you what, goodness me. Yeah, we've got one, and I'll take this. I'll take two more, and then I'll take a couple of. I'll take this online question. So if I may take you, sir, and Carl at the back. If you would like to go first, please. I think there's a microphone here.
Is it on? Hello.
This is Lord Curry, who's just joined us.
Okay. My name's Mike Street, independent observer. I'd just like to talk about the economy, picking up on Mr. Bain's comments. Just to go back in history, at 1956, Sudan had recently become the first African country to be independent, and within a year they were bankrupt because the cotton prices collapsed worldwide, and this was the first experience of Africa's hostage economics, which has become known, and which has affected a lot of the economic development in the meantime. 20 years later, I was fortunate to be in southern Sudan in 1976, working for the Hajar family on their tea and coffee plantations. And at the time, we sort of thought we had discovered a forgotten world where a new type of development could be implemented, because all the other hidden costs of the development model were occurring. Of course, we know what happened then. 1983, things closed up again. And just to fast forward to 2012, southern Sudan finds itself once more in a double hostage economic situation, because 98% of the revenue, as we all know, is oil, and the other hostage situation is that oil passes through the north, and it seems like this could be a very protracted situation. So there are two solutions I'd just like to propose, and I'm sure a lot of other people have all thought of this. The oil to go down through Kenya there's a plan to build a pipeline. There's also a very good idea to build a railway, which it needs to be examined, because that could bring a lot of other benefits other than just exporting oil. That would relieve the first hostage problem away from the north, having to send the oil through the north. The second alternative is an alternative to oil, and this is where we come on to the Mr. Bain's comments about diversifying the economy. As everyone knows, southern Sudan is like a huge green field for investment. There's hardly any development there as we know it. It's probably pretty much the same as when I was there in the 70s. And I propose this is one thing to look at, and I would have liked to have asked the participants in Juba if there is any plan to create a green economy. In Rio de Janeiro, Rio Plus 20, this June, the green economy is going to be one of the top issues. And I think this could be, to create a green economy could be a unique opportunity for southern Sudan to get everybody to collaborate, the World Bank, the Chinese, the EU, the UN, particularly United Nations Environment Programme, to put together a package to deliver at Rio Plus 20 to surprise everybody and to show the world that southern Sudan is in front of the curve.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else?
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Carl Wright, Commonwealth Local Government Forum, and it's really a brief comment and ideally a question for Juba, but it picks up on a point which William Bain was making. I visited Juba in September, and I think we were the first Commonwealth body to be going there. And of course, since then, South Sudan has applied for membership of the Commonwealth. I was very pleased to see the Foreign Minister meet with him at the Commonwealth Heads meeting in Australia in October, and that process is hopefully going to continue. There's certainly a big commitment, not just by the UK, but many of the East African Commonwealth countries like Kenya and Uganda, where I was last week, to working with South Sudan. Of course, a big presence from those nationals in those countries in Juba and in South Sudan. What I really wanted to pick up on was the point made by Mr. Bain, indeed I think by the ambassador in Juba, about the sort of more medium to long-term issues. And clearly, we're very much focused on the short-term humanitarian security and economic crisis, and that's fully understandable. But I think Jeffrey Sachs, who addressed one of our meetings some time ago, director of the Earth Institute, who would be nice to see as head of the World Bank, Jeffrey Sachs said that a lot of the MDG delivery has to be through local government and through local structures. And I think Mr. Bain made the same point about importance of local government. So the question really, or the issue to pose, certainly when I went on a very brief visit in September, there's a very limited infrastructure available, very limited capacity at the federal level. The provincial structures only just going, and local government is non-existent. We're trying to work with the Skills for Southern Sudan NGO to try and take forward issues around strengthening potential local government capacity and including exposure in East African countries for South Sudanese. So I guess the issue I wanted to put on the table is that if there's going to be proper service delivery, decent roads, water sanitation, all those issues does require a very strong local government infrastructure, which currently is non-existent. And the question I guess I had for Juba ideally was, and I see they're back online, which is great, is to what extent are the plans for the constitutional reform, particularly the instigation of local government structures, and I represent the Commonwealth Local Government Forum, how far are they being interrupted by the current crisis, and are those plans being put forward to ensure that that essential infrastructure is going to be put in place in the medium to long term, bearing in mind that...
Let's not take it no further before we lose Juba again. One other question that's come in from Catherine Dederin of MSF in Brussels. Basically, she wanted to pick up the point that you made about humanitarian aid. Be interested in hearing what can be done specifically to increase the emergency response capacity engagement with humanitarian aid. Ambassador, in Juba, that was one question about the capacity for aid. Another question by Carl Wright on the local government structures, how they're being improved, and then a further question here about the possibility of a green economy being put forward by South Sudan. Would you like to address those questions?
I think I should hand over to the panelists. They're all nodding as though they want to speak. We missed an awful lot. I should point out that we've been joined by Paul Acaro, finally, having been sworn in as an ambassador yesterday. We've already congratulated him, and hopefully he'll be able to offer some thoughts too. So would anyone like to pick up any of the questions?
Okay, it's quite a pity that we have lost quite a lot. I will go back to where Honorable Sarah was speaking. I think that was when we got disconnected. And we are, of course, conducting this discussion in the background of very challenging situation in South Sudan, characterized by the implementation of an austerity budget. In terms of planning, I think these were the issues that were on the table at that time. South Sudan has already in place a very huge document, called it the South Sudan Development Plan. The plan contains, this one was concluded by mid-year, last year. Before that, way back in 2008, we had what we call the growth strategy, a strategy that emphasizes development in the agricultural sector, following the Vision of Peace, the CPA. The idea then was, first of all, to restore the subsistence economy that was there and kept the population going. Though not producing much for the export market, but everybody had enough for his household. That was the beginning of the strategy, which of course was aiming at expanding it for wider supply than the immediate family needs. This strategy makes use of where the bulk of the population of South Sudan is engaged, and mainly in basic agriculture, crop production, animal husbandry, fishing, and so on. This strategy got incorporated into the bigger into the bigger plan, which again further elaborates the agricultural sector as the main engine of growth, with government-led and private sector, a large measure of government, private sector participation. The measures now underway emphasize or make use of these plans that are already in place, will be fast-track extension services, provide improved seeds, if possible, organize the farmers into sort of cooperative groups so that they can be even assisted by way of tractors that can help improve in terms of acreage and so on. So the strategy really, the plans really hinge on emphasis on production in the agricultural sector. Right now, most of the urban centers, especially Juba, are mainly fed on food that is sourced from Uganda, including animals, simply because sourcing from Uganda turns out to be cheaper than from the local supply sources. But the animal wealth in South Sudan is many times what Uganda is able actually to provide. So it is this kind of available resources that will have to be tapped into, improved, and made available to the market. The government has, in terms of governance, that was an issue that was raised. The government has in place the ongoing public sector reform, which aims at, first of all, cleaning the payroll, getting rid of names that should not be there, and improving performance generally. Together with it goes the issue of taking control of proper budget execution so that proper fiduciary practices, procurement, good accounting, good public financial management are put in place. At the same time, making sure that government is operated effectively and efficiently. Whatever money we have should be spent on the basis of getting as much out of it as possible. Value for money, so to speak. When we went to Washington, D.C. in mid-December for the International Engagement Conference, there was a huge amount of interest on the business community to come to South Sudan. It can help invest in the country. Unfortunately, a small hiccup like Jongole put paid to whatever gains were achieved in DC. But as we heard earlier on, Jongole is just, it's not even the entire state. It's a couple of provinces, a couple of counties in Jongole that captured, unfortunately, stole the headline. But the rest of South Sudan is calm, is peaceful, quite conducive to basic investment. Despite the austerity measures in place, the government is also planning as much as possible to protect the provision of basic services in the form of water, health, and water and sanitation. To be realistic, whatever is already available by way of funds put up for rainy days, as I said earlier on, the issue of borrowing, good borrowing from good sources cannot be ruled out. A lot of concerned government agencies are busy trying to identify good sources of funding, which of course requires good and proper preparation in terms of where will actually the money so secured go. So feasibility studies to identify the required benefits are being done. This kind of measures are not going to be a quick fix. It's going to be definitely in terms of years. So augmenting whatever the government has been able to save will be through borrowing, good borrowing for that matter, so to speak. This is what I want to contribute in terms of the issues that I was able to hear raised earlier on.
If you want to speak, thank you very much. Dr. Luca, you wanted to speak.
Maybe let me start by. I think we need to look at this crisis in two phases, as you rightly put it, the short term and the long term. But before I could do that one, I just want to highlight the issue of humanitarian situation in southern Kordofan and Blue Nile. I think again the world attests of there is a humanitarian situation unfolding, and depending on how much we can be able to act now. I think we have experience of Operation Lifeline Sudan and what we did during that time, by the time Southern Kordofan, Blue Nile were isolated. And there was a very creative initiative of engaging the cross-border operations. Although that one was based on a very courageous NGOs, international NGOs entering into Southern Kordofan and Blue Nile and managed to provide services. But importantly, that's the time some of the indigenous organizations started coming up, especially the NRDO and then the FUN, because these are the local institutions that are really managed to help during the difficult time during the Operation Lifeline Sudan. Now, as we talk for the issue of access to the Southern Kordofan and Blue Nile, although we don't expect much to come out, I think it is very important for the international community, the whole aspects of no-fly zone, although how difficult it is, I think it is an agenda that needed to be taken upon, I think, morally by the international community. Coupled with that one, in lieu of that one, I think the whole lot of cross-border operation will become a necessity that needed to be supported. And I think the situation is going to be different during the Operation Lifeline Sudan. Because what we know now, there are very good institutions, especially the local organizations. And those local organizations could really play a very important role. One thing I feel that we could do also, because these refugees now that are going to be a burden to the Sudan, to the Republic of South Sudan, which is really struggling to stand by itself with these measures now. So you're having this number of people, I think, supporting the South also in containing and helping the refugees is going to be a responsibility. But I think equally important is how best you can support the local organizations so that they can be able to assist. And I had a very good information about the way they manage the refugees camps along those areas. The second one, as Sarah said, is although we have signed this agreement on the nationals in the two states and the issue of the border, a lot is decided about the implementation. This time, I think the elements of African Union playing a very important role is there, and the international community. I see the following. I think now, as I am coming from Abyei and seeing the situation of about 700,000 Southern Sudanese in the north being threatened by the fact either they lack the documentations or even unable to come back to the south. At least this agreement is opening opportunity for these citizens to at least continue with the normal practice. It depends also to what level the Khartoum is going to abide by that one, because we know certain apparatus at a certain level may also create a very difficult situation to the southerners in Khartoum or in the north generally. But equally important, even for the nomads who are coming to the south, what are the implications of this agreement to them? Because I think it's one thing assigning this agreement, is another thing taking down to the reality. Coming to the crisis, as mentioned by the role of the internet about the austerity measures and the decision of the South, I'm seeing the following. I think for the short term, it is very important, and for the survival of the South, it is very important that the international community, or we in the South, with the Sudan government, the idea that the South use the pipeline in the north is a necessity. I think what is required now is what pressure could you put on the Sudan government to be realistic in terms of what they can really offer, rather than using the pipeline as a way of filling the deficit that's being created by secession. And that mindset itself is not helping us in order to resolve this. So pushing the North to be reasonable, I think it is very important, because it will allow the South to look to the idea of using the pipeline. There is no doubt the austerity measures, as mentioned by advisor Sabuni, I think is going to affect all aspects. I think there's no doubt. I think I'm talking about that. This is actually a big shock to the government. Everything is going to be affected. Even the threat I'm seeing now is that within 3 months, whatever is left with the government now is going to be exhausted. So you are going to go into this pattern of either printing this money with inflation, there is draining up of the foreign exchange, and then eventually it's coming to the people in terms of prices that could actually trigger even political instability. And I think it's very serious. I'm seeing it's a very serious situation we are seeing. So what could we do first, helping the South to go for the refinery? But I think for the international community to see two options. The chances for the South to get loans are quite limited. Because here you have a government that is a government that is reacting to a situation. Those commercial things that you have thugs, you have very groups who are just around in Juba here in order to offer whatever commercial loans that they could offer. And the options are very limited. That the government will be forced to get to a loan that is not credible, a loan that's going to create a real burden to the people for the generation to come, and not a good loans. And then let us limit to what level can we push the government of Southern Sudan for the loans. Is it possible for the concessional loans? Because the South is not yet a member of the IMF, is not yet a member of the... Is it possible to look for a concessional loan? No, the possibilities are not there. Can we be creative to help the government to get concessional loans through the IMF, and we mobilize ourselves to do that one? Or the only option available is Chinese. Whether it's a pipeline, whether it is a refinery, it's Chinese. And the Chinese are also caught up with balancing the interests between the North and the South. Is it possible for the international community to assist the South to get into contact with Chinese to help them out? Helping the South is quite critical, because I'm seeing, and then the issue of aid itself, because I'm seeing even some countries are now to questioning. Actually, some countries not agreeing with the South, and as mentioned by the advisor, is that it was a popular decision. And any action that you want to push the South in order to get into unjustifiable deal is not good. And it seems as if there's a pattern that maybe people would like to use aid itself to push the South to get into agreement, unjustified agreement with Khartoum. And I think international aid, it is very important. This is the time it is needed heavily. And I think those sectors that you have identified, for example, we are talking about water, health, education. We are talking also about the real economy, the agriculture. But even this constitutional review reform, these are the things that we need to focus on. We have a census, which is very important for the political change in the South. And these are the key sectors I feel the international community should be able to continue, if possible. We know the crisis that the West is facing. But this is the time I think the people need to show their solidarity and stand with the people of Southern Sudan. I think one of the points that I heard, and it's very important, that this issue of green identity. Because if you look at the South, if you look at most of the indicators, the carbon dioxide emission in the South is one of the best indicators we have in terms of MDGs. I think this is a country with a lot of opportunities. I mean, we are using only 3.5% of the arable area. Imagine with the traditional system, just we double it, or even 10 times. That will quite a huge change in the South. The South, we don't have those infrastructure, the build-up of big infrastructure. This country should have a green identity. I mean, when you talk about the solar thing, there are a lot of opportunities that we can do, even the aid itself. Could actually help the South having this green identity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Luca. Paul, do you want to say?
I don't know whether I've got anything really to add. I think what the advisor said and what Dr. Luca said actually covered everything that probably I can only give you my apology. Unfortunately, I had to come back to Juba here to attend my swearing in. And then also I had other meeting to put this morning, so I came a bit late. So my apology to the organizers. And nice seeing you, Martin.
It's nice to see you too.
Looking for you. I was looking for you the first time that I heard your voice was in the border when you're reporting about the situation of the refugees. And I was talking to the minister this morning. I was asking whether you met him. Anyway, I just, on the issue which has been said, of course, regarding the law reform, I think Carl was actually asking about the issue with regard to the law reform. I think there is already a committee which was formed not long ago by the president, which is looking into the law reform. And I know Carl, with his role in the Commonwealth local government, is more interested in trying to find out what the role of the local government. These are some of the areas that I'm sure the committee will look into it, and how you're going to devolve powers to the state and to the local government, and how they will relate to the national government. I'm sure in due course those areas will be addressed. That would be the only thing that I could add. Thank you.
Could I ask whether, when we were offline, the question of Commonwealth membership was addressed?
Not really, no.
It would be great if you could.
It would be good if you
right.
could.
Well, I think as it stands at the moment, the Republic of South Sudan indicated its intent to join the Commonwealth, and at the last Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Perth, Australia last October, the Heads of Government tasked the Commonwealth Secretariat to go away and pursue this membership. We're going to be receiving, I understand, a scoping mission from the Commonwealth Secretariat next month to start the whole due diligence process.
Excellent. I would like to know.
Once that is complete, it goes back to then it goes. Membership is actually agreed by consensus of the heads of government. So that is the next step.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to now give an opportunity for the ambassador to say a couple of words, just for a few minutes, because I'd like to get another round of questions in, and then Alex de Waal speak a little bit about the Abyei mission, and if you wouldn't mind. But Ambassador, if you could possibly, in your remarks, do you think you could cover this issue about the non-signing of the security agreement in Abyei, if you wouldn't mind, but just a couple of minutes.
Only this issue. I cannot talk about any other thing.
No, you can talk about what you like, but if you wouldn't mind addressing that issue within what you say.
Okay. I'd like to speak while I'm sitting because I have a problem in my leg.
Please do.
Thank you very much. First, I'd like to express that I'm really happy that I'm participating or attending this important event with in this August institution, and with great and honorable panelists, and with also great audience. First of all, I'd like to say that it's only wise for any human being to believe that if a fire is catching his neighbor house, there is no guarantee that it will not catch his own house. So a wise person will make sure that his neighbor house never catches fire. And to tell you the truth, with all honesty, we would like to have a real good neighborly and friendly relation with Southern Sudan. This is our policy. It has been announced repeatedly since before the secession or the independence of Southern Sudan, and we have facilitated the referendum. If not for the effort of my government, the referendum would not go that smooth. And we know that so many people were talking about rivers of blood. Okay, fortunately, nothing has happened, and the people of both Southern Sudan and South Sudan behaved in a real civilized way. Thank God. I'd like also to thank so many peoples and countries who participated and facilitated both the referendum and the CPA, and still, helping to bring peace and stability to the whole of the region, especially the UK. To be honest, one of the main problems between the North and the South is the lack of trust. We need to build confidence and trust between the two parties. And this has to be worked on from all parties so that there is this mutual respect and mutual trust. The ones who tasted the bitter fruits of war knows very well how devastating is war. We don't want war. It's not our policy. Our policy is against war. And we are the first one to recognize the new state in South Sudan. Today and tomorrow and yesterday, we will say we want friendship. Unfortunately, the leadership of Southern Sudan is not working hard on this area. It was really irritating for us. On the day of the secession, the leader of Southern Sudan was talking about his desire not to forget his comrades in arms in Southern Kordofan. This is in the presence of so many presidents in Juba, and it was really irritating and provocative to the Sudanese people in the north, because we thought now it is time for peace, everybody should work for peace. But if you say that my comrade, I will never forget my comrades in arms, this is really provocative. And unfortunately he did not, because the war that is going on in Southern Kordofan is a proxy war. We know that there are camps, training camps in Southern Sudan for training the rebels of Southern Sudan. The logistics are coming from, Southern Sudan, and a great person from the BBC, Mr. Martin, has seen the military people in the camps, which is quite unfortunate. We'd like everybody, to demilitarize these camps. We don't want camps even. We want people to go back to their places. There are so many challenges in South Sudan that has to be tackled and addressed. I remember the representative of the UN, Hilda Johnson, was talking about the relief money that has been embezzled by some officials and requesting that money be retained. I know for myself that $17 billion has been misappropriated or has been siphoned by some officials in South Sudan and went to the drain. This is quite unfortunate. This money has to go to the services and has to go to the benefit of the people. 17 billion people is a hell of money. This is real money. This can make change, real change. Now, of late, Southern Sudan has shut down the pipeline that is carrying the petroleum from the south to the north. I think everybody knows that all the facilities, the pipeline, the processing units, and the refinery and the terminal for exportation, all these facilities are in the north. Since the independence, we were requesting our brothers in the south to pay for the services we are offering them in these facilities, but they didn't pay anything except for a little, very minor amount, what was called interim cost. The mediators were requesting them, to pay something for even something symbolic for the north. They did not. They continue to use the facilities without paying the cost. It is impossible to use the bus every day without paying for the ticket. It is impossible to take the airplane for 6 months without paying for a ticket. This is natural. We have taken some of the oil, we believe this is our right for the cost only, Yet we don't believe this is the right thing, the ideal solution. But we have done it after the mediator failed, the mediators, Thabo Mbeki and other people, failed to reach even, a middle way, and failed to convince our brothers in the south to do that.
Ambassador, I'm terribly sorry, but we've only 10 minutes left, and I would like to bring in some of the other guests. Could you just address the issue of Abyei, which was one that was specifically
Abyei, the people of Abyei are two people, the Ninkangok and the Miseria. My friend Lokobianka are calling the Miseria, who are at the an important part of indigenous people of Abyei, are calling them the nomads. This is not true. These people are working, developing their animals in the area, okay, but they are indigenous and they stay in Abyei itself for 8 months every year, okay. The other 4 months they go to the north. You cannot call people who are staying there for hundreds of years as nomads. And SPLM were, against their participation in the referendum that will determine the fate of Abyei. This is the essence of the problem. Unless this is addressed, I don't think we will reach a solution.
But will you sign the agreement which gives the security and the fundamental base, the legal basis for the UN to be operating there?
We have accepted that, the forces, the Ethiopian forces, to be in the area. We are ready to support them. We want stability and peace. We will do our best to that effect. But there is one important issue. The administration has to be established. Yeah, there was a suggestion that we nominate 3 people for the speaker, and the SPLM nominate 3 people for the chief administrator. We accepted their nomination. They refused every name we offered them, and this is why the administrator is not working. This is part of the problem. Yeah.
But the agreement?
I don't have. I mean, in principle, if somebody is saying that we want peace, we want stability, we want everybody in Abyei to have his right, referendum for everybody, indigenous people and like the Miseria and the Dinka, this means we want solution. We want solution.
Okay. Well, yeah. Thank you very much, Ambassador.
Thank you.
Alex de Waal, would you just like to say a couple of words about the current state with the negotiations led by the African Union and Thabo Mbeki?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and greetings to the friends and colleagues in Juba. As you all know, the negotiations. I should preface this by saying, although I have been an advisor to the panel, I'm speaking entirely in a personal capacity here. As you all know, the negotiations on the whole have not been going well. There's really not been much goodwill between the parties manifest in Addis Ababa. There's been a great deal of distrust and bitterness. And sometimes, to be honest, I suspect that the delegations the only reason why they turn up is that they take some sort of perverse pleasure in annoying the other side. But there is progress. I think that that there is a certain new realism creeping into the talks, manifest in the agreements that have been signed. And I think that Abyei over the last few months is actually, as Dr. Luca said, a success story. It has shown that with a certain level of goodwill, with leadership at the level of the AJOC that has a sense of accountability to the communities of the area, and with the very effective presence of the Ethiopians, the immediate problems are being resolved. And I would add in that regard that when the interim agreement was being negotiated in June, the issue of humanitarian access was not directly addressed, but the spirit of the talks and the spirit of the principle of AJOC was that the AJOC was a representative of the 2 sovereign authorities, and therefore in terms of the interim administration and implementation, it was not simply a matter for the government in Khartoum to accept or reject the presence of humanitarian agencies. And in that regard, I think Dr. Luca's point on the humanitarian operations there is absolutely correct, and the United Nations should take note. There is a proposal which has been accepted by both presidents, President Omar al-Bashir and President Salva Kiir, for a presidential summit, which the proposal was for that to be in Juba. It may be in Addis Ababa, but most likely in Juba. I think for that to succeed, two major issues need to be addressed. The first is that each side harbours a deeply held fear that the other side has an agenda of regime change. The government in Juba harbours a deeply held fear that there are still proxy forces supported and financed by the government in Khartoum, determined, if not to change the government in Juba, at least to take control of significant areas of South Sudan. And on the side of Khartoum, there is a fear that the agenda of the SPLM North and its ally GEM, which is regime change, is actively supported by the South. And both those fears need to be laid to rest if the summit is to succeed. The other issue is finance and oil. And an oil and finance agreement will certainly be on the table. It will be something akin to a transitional financial arrangement, plus a relatively modest transit fee of a couple of dollars per barrel. That's what I would expect, to be resolved very quickly. And the principle has been accepted that the budgetary gap in northern Sudan is to be filled in approximately 3 ways, divided in 3. A third to be met by austerity measures implemented by the government in Khartoum. A third, transitional financial arrangements from southern Sudan, which probably adds up to somewhere between $2 and $5 billion. That's just my personal opinion. I wouldn't, please don't quote me on that. And then the third would be assistance from the international community. And in this regard, the British government has taken the lead on debt relief, and it's very important that that moves from the technical stage to the political stage, and it is particularly important that the United States comes on board in that regard, because the US, I'm afraid, has a terrible record of delivering on its promises on these issues. And until the US record improves, until it begins to lift sanctions, expedite debt relief, and allow the government of Sudan to get access to international financial institutions, these negotiations are going to go at a very slow pace.
Thank you very much. Well, let it not be said that the United States has not missed a number of promises to Khartoum. It would not be the first that they have not come up with. I'm just going to take very brief. We've got 5 minutes left. I just want 3 quick questions and not points, just questions. I'll take one. The gentleman right at the back there, and Liz. So, sorry, I can't hear you.
Thank you. I'm David Messin from Justice Africa. Justice Africa has a few programs running.
Just a question.
Yeah, in Juba. My question is, with regards to the constitution-making process, which is taking place at this very moment, and I would like to know how prepared the government of South Sudan is to carry out the process, and how prepared they are to include civil society organizations in the process.
Thank you very much. You want to?
Hi, sorry, Max Poles, Crown Agents. We're currently helping the Director General of Customs in South Sudan, and we're seeing at the border with Uganda that they're missing out on $15 to $20 million a month in duty and revenue. And I know tax isn't a particularly welcome issue to talk about in a situation like this, but that revenue shortfall has to be filled. And surely these basic functions of the government need to be addressed.
Thank you. And there was Liz.
Yes, very briefly, I'd like to invite the participants to give their best guess as to how long they think the pipeline's going to be closed.
And I'm sorry, because I did promise you'd get one, but if you wouldn't mind. Very quick question.
Sure, my name is Paul Reynolds. Thanks for setting up the meeting, and thanks to both sides. I just want to put something a bit provocative, which is I want to put the point that isn't it not the case that, notwithstanding the fact that there's a great achievement in achieving independence, the process was nevertheless rushed in many senses, and we have a situation now where the donors and the government of South Sudan are, broadly speaking, they're ill-equipped to deal with the range of issues which have been created by the insufficient preparation for independence. When you look at the refugee problem, people returning to the country, and all the other issues that we're discussing today, it looks like the institutions on both sides of the donors and the government are not sufficient to deal with the problems.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Sorry, yes. Can I ask Juba then, could you very briefly just touch on the points that have been raised, the ill-equipped nature of the donors, the best guess about when the pipeline will be opened, the missing $15 to $20 billion on the border. Sorry? Yeah, sorry, $1 million, my apologies. And whether the civil society will have a right to be involved in the constitution writing process.
Very quick comment on the Sudanese ambassador's remarks. I think he started very well, but he, towards the end, allowed himself to be carried away by emotion. In terms of the 17 billion he claims to have been embezzled, I don't know where he got his data from, but the facts are as follows. Over the last 6 years, the currency of the interim period, South Sudan, as per the wealth sharing agreement, was getting an average of 2 billion a year. 2 times 6 is 12. Even if every penny was stolen, the theft would not go to 17 billion. Even if every penny was stolen, it would still be 12 billion. And we know that that's not the case. So I think the ongoing constitutional review committee exercise, of course, has taken on board quite a range of cross-section of the South Sudanese population. But all the same, I think certain sections, certain key sections, much as possible. So to us, that is not really a big issue. These are the two remarks I elected to comment upon, and I think my colleagues will add. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think I will be very brief. I think on the constitutional process, the law is very clear, the inclusion of the civil society organizations. I think how much time
be raised from the custom duty, from the borders. I think these are some of the things that the government is already working on it, because it is true that no much emphasis was actually put on it for some time, and now the crisis of the oil has made us also realize that that particular sector of the government need to be equipped in order for us to raise a lot of revenue which is coming through the borders with the neighboring country. I think these processes are already in place. And I just wanted to add quickly from what Dr. Lucas said with regard to the pipeline. To reopen the pipeline, there must be some kind of guarantee to ensure that whatever resources that will be paid to the north in terms of the transit fee will have to be something that we know that this money will be used wisely to the benefit of the people, not something that can be used toward, waging the war with Southern Kordofan, Southern Blue Nile, and Southern and then that war, because we also, as human beings and part of the international community, we don't want to make sure that the resources that we are giving out is also used to kill other people as well. So these are some of the things that the international community need to take a very proactive role to ensure that if there is any agreement being reached, there should be some kind of guarantees, to make sure also that we feel comfortable about it. The fee that the North has been demanding about the 36 is completely outrageous.
A full and proper impact assessment. so that not only the environmental impact of that investment is properly understood, but the social impact is of long-term benefit to the indigenous population within that area, and that is not in any way seen as exploiting the natural resources that South Sudan have, because there are fantastic natural resources in South Sudan, and it's essential that any investment takes place for the long-term benefit of the South Sudanese people and not short-term gain for those who are looking to exploit those reserves. And we need to establish models working with the government of South Sudan to ensure that does not happen. And I'm very keen that we establish some precedents, some models which influence future investment to the long-term benefit of South Sudan. Paul, congratulations on your appointment. It's very good news.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sarah, would you just like to...
Just one final comment. I just want to pick on what both Luke and Presidential Advisor Thies have commented on in terms of the support, the popular support that the decision of the oil shutdown enjoys. And it's true. I mean, you know, again, having just returned from Juba, at least at the Juba level, there is support for the decision. But I think we should also bear in mind the extent to which, you know, so many parts of, you know, the population of South Sudan are still to enjoy, you know, the benefits of, you know, independence and what independence they thought would bring to them. I mean, there are so many communities in South Sudan that still live in incredible poverty, and we've talked about all the challenges that South Sudan faces, and you know how these challenges will be accelerated by the oil shutdown. So while it's true that you know there may be support at one level, I also feel that people do not fully appreciate you know the impact that the oil shutdown will have on their lives and how this will make you know their daily life even more difficult. We've already seen in areas like you know Bentiu and other places on the border areas after the closure of the border how prices have tripled, and you know of course there have been effects on the economy also in Sudan. So I think we need to you know to remember this support, you know, these gains may be very short term, but long term, people both in Sudan and in South Sudan will obviously start to feel, you know, the more lasting consequences of this decision, and hopefully, you know, keep that in mind to try and see how we can, how can both parties can re-engage, you know, in talks that can lead to a more constructive outcome.
Well, it then leaves me only to say thank you very much for everyone for participating. Thank you very much for all the guests in Juba and with your really interesting comments and the points that you made, for everybody who was online and watching this, and of course everyone here in the room, including you, Ambassador. And I don't know, perhaps I should offer you the final opportunity to accept Alex Duval's kind offer of $2 a barrel for transit. This is not a great opportunity. Perhaps not. But can I just also thank the ODI for arranging this event. Thank you very much.